good. Okay, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to another edition of the Melanated Council of Yang. I am here with, you guys go ahead, name you guys off one by one.
Tobe. Fred.
Genie.
What's up, y'all? My name is Marcus.
I'm Ashley.
Yes, you guys heard it. We have Fred on with us tonight, and we're going to talk about a really touchy subject, but I think it needs to be addressed. And for those that are in the chat, welcome. So we're going to talk about the Second Amendment and how it relates to the Black community and other communities as well, and basically just kind of get that information out to you guys. You guys make your own decisions. We all have different perspectives and backgrounds, but at the end of the day, we want to give you the information so you can make your own sound decision. Okay?
All right.
Cool. So, Fred, we got some questions that we want to kind of like ask you, but at the same time, kind of get your opinions about it. But at the same time, we also want to open up that dialogue to you as well. If you have any question you want to ask us, again, feel free to do so, and let's just have this discussion, okay?
Yeah, not a problem. We'll have fun.
All right. So who wants to start us off with the first question?
Oh, we're asking Fred the questions.
Yeah.
I guess, how do you think do you think there's some kind of what's it called, hypocrisy among the Second Amendment movement, the NRA and all of that, when they say, everyone has the right to bear arms, but they don't really, that doesn't really apply to us, because you see cases like Philando Castile, who had a weapon and he was killed, and you didn't see the NRA making a big deal about it. Do you think there's some hypocrisy there?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room to make a case for hypocrisy on the NRA's case, and I think that if obviously I'm a white person, it's pretty evident. If I woke up Black tomorrow, I would probably inquire about, I think it's the NAAGA, right? Because, and I think it's the North American African American Gun Owners Association, something like that, right? I don't really feel like the NRA is the end all be all for one group of people, much less all Americans, in terms of making a decision on, am I going to be a gun owner or not? So yes, I mean, there wasn't a really, I didn't hear of a big, a big outcry on Castile, or the same thing could have been made for Breonna Taylor, right? Because Breonna Taylor, her boyfriend fired on the cops, and the cops fired on her, right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they just busted the door in, and with it just seemed, if you read that story as well, it seems a little odd, to say the least. So how do you guys feel about it?
I feel like the NRA could certainly do better and be more inclusive. I feel like as a Black person, I wouldn't walk around with my weapon showing. Obviously you should have it concealed, but there's some places where you really can have it showing, and I feel like the NRA should do better and have a more inclusive stance and say, well, we all, if some of us can have weapons, then all of us can have weapons.
Agreed. Agreed. And just go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I think there's, it makes you question what the NRA's real motive is. Is it really gun rights, or is it, is it white supremacy? Because it's like, why is there only an outcry when it involves a white person? When it involves, Democrats saying that we're going to take your guns away, and not when somebody's defending their lives against a cop, rightfully so. So, it makes you question the whole, the whole motive behind the NRA movement. Like, are they just for making sure everyone has their gun rights and that all American citizens have the right to bear arms, or is that exclusive to only one group? Or
So to push back on that, and I'm not saying this is my case, but I'm thinking that this is probably what they're thinking. So there's probably a lot of police that are, all about being NRA. Can we get an agreement on that? Probably.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're NRA, you're probably thinking, oh man, if I come down on the police, I might be coming down on half of my, my subscriber base. You know what I mean? And then people might jump. So I think that there's probably a lot of politics involved and a lot of decision makings. The decisions that people make in that scenario where they're trying to probably weigh the cost. And to be quite honest with you, sometimes people will say things as if somebody cares about them, right? Like if anybody's been in a chat with me, you've probably heard me say, like, you were under the assumption that they cared about you, right? Right? Like, you're speaking as if your voice matters, right? Like they don't care about you, right?
Yeah.
Right? And it's a horrible reality, right? But I think it comes down to, and it almost always comes down to finances, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think probably the cops, who are probably bigger supporters of the NRA than the black community is, had a bigger voice in that scenario. And I'm not saying that I'm not defending that.
Yeah.
I think that was probably their line of thinking.
Oh, 100%. Money does talk in this country. So if you have a group that's going to give me X amount of dollars to support them, and a group who's not going to give me as much, I'm going to pick the one with the bigger pockets. So I get it.
Yes. I think. America's always been ruled by, the wealthy, not even the 1%, like the 0.01%. And they're the ones who call all the shots in Congress. Even if they're not the ones themselves in Congress, they call the shots by buying all the politicians out.
So I got a question.
It's funny that you mentioned that. If you have another question, go ahead and ask. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because people were talking about, like, when we were in a presidential race, people talk about phone banking and knocking doors, and I'm not saying those things don't help to a smaller degree, but I was always thinking to myself, like, if phone banking and canvassing mattered, then Bernie would be the president, or not the president, but he would be the DNC. He would be the victor of the DNC side, right? But it's almost like, when it comes to politics and you're talking about Congress, they already have an idea what they want and who they want.
Mhm.
And then they have their 1A, 1B, and they're always, it seems like the powers that be are always hedging their bets. You know, like, okay, if Biden can't win, then we'll go this way with, Buttigieg. And I know, this doesn't have as much to do with the Second Amendment, but what it has to do with is it seems as if, whether it's guns, whatever the situation is, it seems like almost everything is predetermined. And the decision makers have already made their decision, and we're just waiting for them to enact what their decision is going to be. It's almost like we don't matter. So I understand why people wouldn't want to carry a gun or are ardent supporters of carrying a gun, right? And there's not a lot of gray matter in there. If you notice, like, you have your people that are like, no, I'm not a gun owner and I'm not really with gun ownership. And then you have your people that are just like all about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem like there's, any reasonable gray area in there.
So what do you think is it about America's culture that makes guns such a very important thing, to be an American? Because we have, more guns than people in this country. And, out of every single country in the world, we have the most guns here. So, like, what do you think it is about America specifically that, makes this even possible?
I think that Americans love a fight.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we love a good boxing match. We love a UFC match. We love a war. If there's anybody wants to screw with us in the on the national stage, our immediate reaction is blow them out of the water. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, just make dust out of them, right? And I think that because we like a good fight, we always like the idea of being able to take matters into our own hands in the event that there's something could go or would go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then I think for some people, I think that there's a fear that our government could turn against us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
what I think is really kind of how would I put this? I think it's not it's irrational. Is that, like, an 80-year-old guy in Arkansas thinks that his government would come after him, but a 18-year-old black male in New York doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
Right?
you're right on it. Oh,
Right? Like, so like, and what I mean by that is, like, if you look at all of the, some of this does stem from the Civil War, right? Because people just picked up guns and just went to war. Like, they just, like, if you could imagine just grabbing your shotgun or grabbing your AR, your AK, and just.
I mean, I think Andrew Yang for Prez is right. I mean, the country was founded on violence and genocide.
It's always been that
And
way.
so, I think you hit it right on the head of the nail when you said that, people are afraid that the government will turn against them. It speaks to Americans' distrust in the government.
Well, here's the kicker, and one of the things I want to push back on the DNC on, or one of the things that I think that, and I talk to white people about this a lot, because if you look at people who say black people are safer without weapons, it's a lot of white progressives, and I'll say, like, do you believe in equality? And they'll say yes. And I'm like, okay, so since you believe in equality, you believe that we should all have access to the same water, should all have access to the same food quality. We should also all have access to the same healthcare quality. We should all have access to the same security, being able to secure yourself, even if it's a weapon. Well, that's different because this particular race is more apt to be attacked by the police. And I'm like, okay, how many times do we have to see the front page of the article say unarmed black man, unarmed black man, unarmed black man, and tell you like, yes, are there instances where armed people of color get gunned down? Yes, right. Are there instances where armed white people get gunned down? Yes, that happens too, right? However, black people are 2.7, almost three times more. They're more apt to be killed by a police officer than a white person. 2.78, almost 3%. So the numbers are the numbers, right? So there's no hateful numbers, there's no sad numbers, there's no angry numbers. Numbers are numbers, right?
Yeah.
And the numbers are not in the black community's favor when it comes to being killed by the police, whether it's armed or unarmed. So for me, if I was to wake up black tomorrow, right? I would rather go out on my shield, right? If I'm gonna die at the hands of a police officer, I would rather have an option to take out the officer because I would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
So if you don't mind, I'm gonna interject. That's never gonna happen. As a black person, I would never in my wildest imagination shoot at a cop, even if he's shooting at me. Because no matter what happens, you see the videos, you have all the eyewitnesses. I'm either gonna go to jail or I'm gonna get murdered. It doesn't matter.
No, but I think the thing is he'd rather go down with the fight than, just be killed, without being armed at all and not being able to defend yourself.
And I was going to even ask her, because I know, one, you have Queen and Slim, which of course is fiction, but that's exactly what happened, right? The guy defended himself from the cops, and then the whole movie, they were on the run. And then even with George Floyd, I know some people were like, maybe we should have been carrying, but I even thought, wait a second, are people saying that in that moment someone was going to pull out a gun and shoot the officer, all 4 of them, who were typically holding him down? Because I'm like, wait a moment, that's not going to end well. And it's there's a lot of energy around that kind of thinking of man, maybe we need to start arming ourselves. And I'm like, I'm not against that, but what was I going to have done right in that moment?
I hear a lot of sentiments about the protests. Remember during the mask protests when all those white people were carrying guns, and they said the reason that the police feel like they can tear gas black people is because and if they had guns, they wouldn't be treated the way they are during their protests. What do you guys actually think about that?
I have an interesting, because I've posed this question to people. I posed that question to Yang Gang. 75% of Yang Gang said, and I posed the question, was it their white skin that saved them, or was it the guns that saved them? 75% said it was their white skin.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
What do you guys think?
I think it was their white skin, because if you don't have white skin, you can't brandish a gun like that.
I think it's very interesting. I guess it makes sense that, when you go to these protests, they're using non-lethal weapons to, I guess, keep blood off the street and all of that. But at the end of the day, the wealthy, the powers that be, they need the working class. They need us to work. They need us to consume. And we have more power than we're led to believe. If all of us join hands to overtake, I know I'm reading up on history now, And it basically talks about, well, it's called this book. I know it's by Howard Zinn. I think it's called The People's History. And he talks about how, well, one example is Bacon's Rebellion. Poor white people, during the time where poor white people were indentured servitude, so they were like slaves, but they, the difference was that they could get off in like 5 to 7 years. And so during the Bacon's Rebellion, poor white people and slaves, they actually joined hands to overtake the rich. And it was like an insane revolt against the wealthy. And after that, the powers that be, the rich, they made it a thing to, separate the white people from Black people, to divide them so that they couldn't join hands, because they know that, the movement is extremely strong if they, come together. And so what they did was, like, during, you have the Jim Crow laws, and, while the poor white people may have been poor, I mean, you still had, the color of their skin, so they could go to the clean water fountains, they could go to the well-resourced schools, they could go, sit at the front of the bus. I mean, so they had something that separated them from Black people, which, gave them the upper hand in a sense. And so, this caused division. So there was really no chance of, Black people and white people coming together, because the poor white people were like, I have these rights. I mean, as long as I have this, and I'm like above them, then I'm okay, And you look at that and you're like, you see all this division in the world, and you're like, what if we all came together? And why? I mean, America is just really like divided. Like, it's just like, so like not even like the liberals, are really united. Because I mean, you have the moderates, the so-called progressives, the whole socialist movement and all that, and they can't even like join hands or whatever. But it's deeper than that, because I mean, both parties are the same, and they divide us by party as well. And they make us believe that, we're on the side of the morally superior, and that Republicans think they're also on the side of the morally superior. And so this creates a conflict, and it prevents us from ever joining hands, because everybody's just like so against us. It's hard to even like sit at the kitchen table with conservatives if you're a Democrat. Like, politics is just such a touchy subject, because like we're so divided, especially during these times. And so, like, with the whole gun movement, it would be a interesting thing to watch if people started bearing their arms, and Black people, white people, and all of them came together and went full force against all this corruption in the nation.
That's amazing, Ashley. So I want to kind of take this in a different direction. So I picked up a gun for the first time 4 years ago at a shooting range. I'd never actually even touched a gun for my entire life before that. And we had a great time firing at the firing range. I hit a lot of targets. But then the next day, I got a call that somebody very close to me, who was probably like one of the biggest like gun ownership, pro-gun people in my life, had died from suicide. So how do we decrease, like, why do you think there's such an increase of suicides among people that own guns? And how can we decrease that? Fred, you got an opinion about that?
I mean, what Canada does is they run a background check daily, right? I watched a thing on Vice on Canada's gun laws. They have everything we have: P90s, AKs, ARs. They have the best hardware. But they literally, every single person who's a gun owner has a background check every single day. I don't know the answer to that situation. I really don't. And sometimes I feel like there are some problems that are just so, it's almost like they're impossible to solve. And if you listen to Andrew Yang talk, you can see through what he's saying and get to the heart of it. He'll say things like, if somehow we can convince Americans to do A, B, and C, he's not saying we're going to do A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. And I was in New Hampshire, and he was pressed, like they asked him the same question like 4 different ways. And he said, to be quite honest with you, he said, both sides are so entrenched, I don't know how much we're going to be able to get done. Which was like, honestly, that was like the most honest answer I ever heard any person, especially Democrat, right, give for gun control. Because most Republicans would be like, we're not going to do anything. You know what I mean?
So you're going more the like self-responsibility route, that like people should really judge themselves and judge their own mental health to see if they're actually like capable of carrying guns without any thought of harm to themselves.
Yeah, probably, honestly.
You know,
I mean, yeah, honestly, yeah. I think.
Is that what
but the truth is, like, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people like aren't really aware of how they are mentally. I know this is kind of like tying into last week's episode about mental health, and that people, especially men, don't go to the doctors or go to therapists as much. So a lot of them like don't really know, I think, how bad off they really are, how close they are to the edge. And I think a lot of gun owners, especially with the like more gun owning demographics, the middle-aged men who are like some of the highest suicide rates and also highest gun owners.
I think a better question to ask is, why is the suicide rate in America constantly increasing? I feel like, that's also what attracted me to Yang. He was like, the suicide rate keeps increasing. It's increased the life expectancy has decreased for the last 3 years. But the suicide rate has also increased. You look at this terrible economic system we have now. I'm a young person. I'm 20 years old. And, it's like, it kind of feels like you're trapped in a sense, because it's like, you go to college for 4 years and you're not even guaranteed, a well-paying job. I've worked with a lot of people who graduated from college, and I worked at like Starbucks. I worked at bakeries and all of that. And, these were, college grads, and, they were, they had this kind of feeling, I could tell in themselves, that they were just like lost, and they didn't really know like what was to come of their life. So the system that we've created, it's just really brutal, because even if you graduate from college, you're in tens of thousands of dollars of debt, or even 6-figure debt. Some people do end up in 6-figure debt, and you're not even guaranteed a job. And then you don't go to college. You can, work up the ranks in, other jobs and stuff like that. But, I think a lot of young people, they just feel really, really lost. Because I felt that way too. You go ahead.
I had this really hot take on Twitter like a few months ago, and it kind of upset a lot of people, but I feel like a lot of people agreed on it as well. I said,
you don't say.
I said, I think the freedom dividend would do more to curb gun violence than gun control.
Yep. Oh, yep,
by far.
Oh. You know why?
Like if all these people had $1,000 extra a month, it would curb their stress. It would curb their mental health. Like being poor it lowers your IQ. As studies have shown that.
Yep.
And if that happens, then I feel like gun control, suicides would all decrease.
I think young people, they just want to see that they have a future. And you can't have a future without any opportunity. And where does opportunity come from? It comes from cash flow. It comes from money.
So
Absolutely.
So when I spoke to people at the Tulsa Trump rally, both I spoke to BLM people and I spoke to Trump supporters. The one thing that I talked about was financial opportunity, right? So I just talked about constant, I kept hammering financial opportunity. What if we had somebody in place or something in place that would allow us to have a floor of let's say $1,000 a month paid for by big tech that's taking all our information and giving us nothing in return. And people actually were very, very open to it. On the gun thing, what I think UBI would do would restore trust in the government. And then once we restore trust in the government, we can then maybe convince Americans that we might be able to have some kind of new gun policy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the way that Canada does their gun policy, I mean, they literally make people go through tests. You have to take apart your weapon. You have to be able to clean your weapon. They test you. I have no problem with the way Canada goes about their gun policy. But I just wanted to address back to the power of guns. How many of you have seen a gun owner like carry a weapon, like open carry, either whether it's a sidearm or a rifle?
I can talk about that. I can talk about that.
Hey, Fred.
What actually? What'd you say?
I said I've actually never seen a person, carry a gun in their.
Where do you live again?
I live in Texas, so but I live in.
Oh, you're in Austin, right?
Austin, Texas.
But I grew up.
So you're saying you're never rolling around Round Rock somewhere and boom, there's like that never happens. Like where you live?
I've been here for only 2 years, but I was born and raised in Houston. But like in Houston, it's I believe it's like 35% Hispanic, maybe like 47% white. And then there's a lot of Black people, maybe like 20% or something like that. So it's like extremely diverse. And I feel like maybe you only find that kind of thing like in the rural parts of Texas, maybe. But I've never seen a person carry a gun in their holster.
I think it could be because you're someone of such young lifespan,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because I could tell you that there's a lot of open carry happening in Texas and Houston. I like to use Houston as an example because if you take Houston, and I like that you mentioned how diverse it is, Houston is about as equally within 1% or 2% on each side of white, Black, and Latino.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same diversity as Chicago, Illinois.
Mm.
But because of the way they do their gun laws there, people are protected in Houston, where a lot of people in Chicago are not protected.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you look at a lot of the gun laws, they're taking, and these are actually Democrats are in office in these areas. They're taking guns out of the hands of Black people.
I honestly don't think that Chicago's problems have anything to do with their gun laws, honestly, or anything to do with guns.
Mm-hmm.
Because I lived in Illinois back when I was a teenager. Around that time, all the Chicago shootings, it started becoming a whole crime meme. So
what do you think the problem is?
Economic opportunities, definitely, because I stayed in Chicagoland. I'm like 10, 20 miles away from Chicago, never worried about being shot out in the street. But you go down to certain parts and you can see it. Their schools are defunded. They're afraid to go to school. They're hungry. They're starving. And you go there and you can immediately see why that place is the way it is. They have all of these taxes, but yet none of these taxes actually end up circling around to their schools, to their neighborhoods. I feel like a little bit of economic opportunity, one medium-sized factory or a freedom dividend would do a lot more to help that city than gun laws. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I promise you that I've been to Houston, and there Ashley might she might back me up on this. There's some rough areas and there's some lack of opportunity in Houston as well.
It's kind of like in Houston, there's really successful Black people, but then yes, of course, there's those pockets of poverty, the projects and all that. But Houston is a very interesting place.
Houston is really a very, very interesting place.
Yeah, it's it's kind of, I don't know, kind of like
Chicago,
because Black people do really well in Houston. There's opportunity here. We have a Black mayor, and we had a white female gay mayor as well.
Yeah,
so,
I actually met the mayor when I was in Houston when I think it was the third debate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he actually gave a really, really good speech. The point that I'm making is that a lot of policy where we're stripping a gun right ownership from people. It's not in rural Arkansas. It's not in rural Louisiana. It's not in Montana in the middle of nowhere. It's very targeted and it's very specific. It's Chicago, Baltimore. There's a lot of places that we're stripping guns from. I've actually been to places where I think it was Connecticut, I was in kind of a tough neighborhood in Walmart, and I'm like, they don't even sell ammunition in this Walmart. And then I go 50 miles from there, and they sell ammunition in a rural part of Connecticut, right?
Yeah.
So it's painfully obvious, and this is something that I think our legislative people need to account for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To your point, Fred, I've noticed that a lot of these crime hubs, the places with a lot of crime, tend to be a lot of the big cities ran by Democrats. L.A., Chicago, Minnesota, the Minneapolis, or where that the George Floyd incident took place.
Minneapolis,
a lot of these cities with all these high poverty rates tend to be cities ran by Democrats. Why do you think that is?
I think that it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned this. Because on the state level, it's the opposite direction, right? If you go state by state, it's the opposite direction. But if you go city by city, it's blue, right?
You think it's because they're big cities?
No, I'm saying if you go Alabama and West Virginia, right? And Arkansas are mostly red, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you go city for city, the bluer it is, the more poverty it is, right? So if you go state by state, the red side is screwing people up, right? Where if you go city by city, the more blue it is, the more poverty that you see. And when it comes, for me, this is just my opinion. I think the reason I asked you guys originally, what do you like? What's your initial thought when you see somebody open carry? Mm-hmm. My initial thought is, oh snap, he's got a gun, right?
Yeah.
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 Right.
I think it depends where I'm at. Like if I'm at like a barbershop, it kind of like clicks because hey, he's an independent business owner. Someone could come in and try to rob him. But if it's like just randomly on the street, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Fred.
Well, here's the kicker, right? I think that, and I asked this question to the Yang Gang. And back to that question, do you think it was their white skin that saved them, or do you think it was their guns? Right? 75% of subscribers said it was their white skin. I can guarantee you, the white Antifa got served by the cops. They got their butts kicked. They got gassed. They got maced. They got the SHIT kicked out of them, right? And in the 60s, the Black Panthers went to the state building in California. They were de-armed and given their weapons back. But the first thing anybody with an AR-15 on his back, when you're met with somebody who has an AR-15 strapped to his back, the first thing you want to know is, who are you? What are you? What are your demands? And basically, it's like a customer service call, right? Like it's automatic. Like, how can I help you? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And like, you never see a group of men or women that are armed to the teeth that get gassed and beat the hell out of, other than, there are some one-offs like, they did Waco, Texas like that, or Ruby Ridge, but those are like huge international incidents. But you rarely see, even, when I went to the rally, there were people there with guns, right? And there were Black people there with guns. Mm-hmm. And people treated those people with respect, and the cops steered clear of them, and the Antifa steered clear of them. So I feel like the cops sometimes are like they're like Bloods or Crips on steroids, right? Absolutely. They're like the biggest gang in town. And when they see another rival gang, right, which is, a bunch of unnamed people, whether they're white or Black, with AR-15s, they kind of like, oh, well, let me go over here to these unarmed people and let me make them the problem today.
Yeah, I certainly think cops pick their battles. 100% cops. I 100% think cops pick their battles.
I know. Yeah, in Michigan, right? There are all those protesters in the State House that were armed. Were armed and they were yelling in the face. Some of them were like pulling like on the cops. The cops really barely did anything in response to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can guarantee you, had them guys not have AR-15s, they would have got their butts handed to them.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. And there's a bunch of situations where I can talk on personally, because going back to what Fred said before about have I seen anybody open carry, I lived in Colorado Springs for 7 years, and it was like you wake up in the morning, it was common. It was common for people to walk into Walmart, with AR-15 on the back and then had a pistol on their hip. It was common, white and Black. It was common that we saw
Colorado that like that.
Yeah, and it was in state law. It was open carry as long as you were legally able to carry a firearm. You could open carry. They said nothing about it.
It mesmerizes me as somebody who travels all over this country. Why certain people have more access to one thing than another? What? Like, how do you guys feel about that?
Certain people.
I think it's a question. Money.
Like where you live determines your access to anything, whether it's organic food, weapons, water. It's like, I mean, if I can ship something, if I can get online and order something from China, why can't we all have access to the same water, weapons, food, and education.
I think it really comes down to resources. Like, I would much rather live in like a big city, San Antonio, or like New York City, Austin, than live in like a small rural city. Just because I know that if I really want to go to Whole Foods, or if I really want to go to a park, if I want to do anything that's positive, it's probably going to be in a bigger city because small cities don't have the funding.
True.
Yeah, I think it like really has to do with again, like income inequality. It's like
Policy.
the quality of the schools depends on property taxes, and oftentimes, well, I mean, it's true. Like in poverty, there's barely any property taxes, and so like there's no money to fund the schools. And then you think about Whole Foods. I mean, the people in poverty wouldn't be able to afford Whole Foods. I mean, that's just the truth. Whole Foods is not for people who are in poverty. Whole Foods is affluent in the middle class, and those are the ones that they're the target consumers that Whole Foods has in mind. Now, if Black people, in poverty, I don't really think it's a race thing. It's there's this. I feel like this talk about race, it should be focused on class and how resources is the main culprit in all of this. Because I mean, if Black people had the resources, had money and were living in the suburbs and had 2-story homes and all of that, they'd be able to shop at Whole Foods. I mean, there would be a Whole Foods in their area. Racism stems from classism.
I agree.
Even if you think about the history of like how this nation started, slavery only occurred because they wanted free labor to make a bigger profit off of cotton, tobacco, and all of that.
And not to interrupt, but there are some people that actually surmise that if it wasn't for the machinery that had taken place, that had make it more possible for slavery to end, that we might still have slavery. Because
that's a very good point.
We were able to automate a lot of the jobs that slaves did in the fields. Had automation not came to the farming the way it did, some people believe we would still have slaves in like literally right now picking stuff.
Yeah. The thing is, like, even right when like in the 1600s, 1700s, the indentured servitude, they were treated just like the slaves at first. And actually the indentured servitudes, the poor whites, they were actually pretty close. And so, the rich, the powers that be, they knew that they had to divide the poor whites, the indentured servitudes, and the Black people. And so how they did this was give, once the indentured servitudes, the white indentured servitudes were released from captivity, they were offered I believe 50 acres and some bushels of corn or something like that. I'm reading this history book, so I'm learning a lot. And so, how we were promised 40 acres and a mule, the indentured servitudes, they got their, 50 acres and crops and all of that. And so they give, what was I saying? And so, there wasn't always this race issue in America. This race issue started because they wanted to divide us in order to make us weaker. The real divide is class. The real divide, because it's like, why it's funny because it's like poor white people support Trump. It's like, how is he helping your economic situation? It's like, and then you have poor Black people. It's like, you two have similarities. So why aren't you combining to make your situations better? The reason is racism and, the divide of the parties and all of that. you would think that, two groups who are oppressed in the same way would, join hands and make the movement stronger and build the numbers. But, we're so divided that that's not even possible. And so that's the intention of, it's always been the intention of the wealthy. And as long as they keep this system, then we're slaves to them. All of us, not just Black people.
Well, this is one of the reasons I think ranked choice voting is so incredibly important, because it will bridge. Because what we have right now is we have the right and the left getting that's widening so incredible that if you want to reach across the aisle, you have to have 35-foot arms now. You know what I mean? Like there is no reaching across the aisle anymore. Like we are so incredibly divided, and the divide is getting worse and worse and worse. And I think ranked choice voting will help that particular situation. I just really want to make the point to anyone that's listening that, especially a lot of people that are fighting against Black people being armed for their own safety, you unknowingly are perpetuating not only you're perpetuating white supremacy, and you don't even know it. And you're doing it unknowingly, because you wouldn't say white people should do it. You wouldn't say white people should de-arm for their own safety. So if you wouldn't say that, why would you say Black people should de-arm for their own safety? And I heard, I think it was, I can't remember who. I think it was either, who's the guy that has the fro that is light-skinned, that's light-skinned, that is like I want to say Colin West?
Cornel West. Okay, Cornel West, right? He said
the greatest the worst white supremacy is when people make white supremacist points and they don't even know it, or when Black people do it.
Yeah,
because I've heard Black people say Black people are safer being unarmed, and I'm like,
I think there's just like this disconnect, because it's like I see where they're coming from, because like in Chicago, the so-called Black on Black crime. Yeah, I saw someone in the comments.
Cornel West, yes.
I think she's frozen.
Somebody in the comments was talking about its vicinity more than race, and I agree with it 100%.
Yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought.
You were talking about the person who was talking about the Black on Black crime versus the vicinity in the chat.
Yeah, and then Fred, what were you talking about? Oh, you were talking about. Wow, why do I lose?
Yeah, I was talking about how.
Hey, pass me that joint.
I was talking about how whites. Cornel West was talking about how the worst case of white supremacy is when the left liberals who are trying to stick up for Black Lives Matter, but are also making points that are white supremacist points unknowingly, and that when Black people are making white supremacist points unknowingly because they're programmed, like I've heard Black people say things about themselves where I'm like,
that comes from a lot of what I hear about that. You hear a lot of people say, Black on Black crime and stuff like that. I think a lot of people are genuinely concerned, because, you have in Chicago, like, shootings every single day, and,
Yeah.
people just shooting each other, gangs and all of that. And that is very concerning. But it's not a race thing. The thing is,
Poverty thing.
It's a what?
Poverty.
You're saying that it's a poverty thing.
Poverty thing. It's a poverty thing because what happens when you push a bunch of poor people into one area of a city, and all they can see around them are other people, and they don't really see opportunity. They have terrible schools. They have to it's basically survival of the fittest. They they end up having to sell drugs because it's like there's just like so many traps you can end up in jail for. Having to take care of your siblings, and your mom not being able to really pay the rent. And so, you try to come up with the easiest way to make ends meet, or you end up in the prison system for, something like, selling weed or having weed in your possession. The cop wanted to be a jackass. And so you end up in the prison system, can't get a job because, every single job application asks, are you an ex?
That's literally like the new Jim Crow, right? So the new Jim Crow is to take it, we've all seen the movie 13th, where it talks about the 13th Amendment, where it's like, okay, well, we'll allow you the 13th Amendment, but we're gonna incarcerate. Like I think it was like 1/3 of all black males in certain states and certain cities have had to take a plea deal, which would take away their voting rights and their gun rights, or they'd have to apply, like I did, for their gun rights back, which they may or may not know how to do, or apply to get their voting rights back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it, and I don't want to leave tonight without saying, like, I feel honored to be here, right? Because like, obviously, I'm a white person. You know what I mean? Right. And that one of the things that, if you're watching this and you are a white person, I think that the black community is extremely understanding and forgiving, and they will not cancel you. I think more white people will cancel you for saying dumb shit or just saying whatever is on your mind, right? Than black people will, right? Mm-hmm. And I also think that, like, when I have, if you're a white person and you have an issue with the black community or the way that, because people have culture. There are things in the white culture that annoy the shit out of me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, white people don't argue and they avoid conflict at all costs, by and large, right? And it freaking gets on my nerves where it's like we can't even like have a decent argument and then it be over like 5 minutes later and then everything be gone. Other than people on the East Coast. White people on the East Coast can argue the shit out of anything.
I feel like a question that we probably didn't ask that I think is very interesting is, do we think guns are the answer? Like, with this whole black people are oppressed in this country, the new Jim Crow and, black people being, we're still oppressed and basically still enslaved because, modern day slavery in the prison system and all of that, and it's like we've been enslaved since we got here to America, and it just doesn't seem like there's any escape. Also, it's just like, when people say, violence is not the answer, I think it's interesting because, every movement in history needed violence.
There's some situations you can't talk yourself out of.
Yeah. True. And it's funny. I didn't mean to cut you off, actually, but
no, you're good.
But to answer your question, it was actually something that was brought up earlier in the chat. A guy asked, I think it was Metajaw, He actually said, have we seen a spike in legal gun ownership in the Black community?
Yes, we have.
And I would say yes, especially I live in Michigan. In the two cities that I know of for sure that a lot of Black people that live in that have applied to purchase a firearm, oh yeah, it's gone up due to the fact that the things that are happening now, especially, you know, when the coronavirus hit Michigan and we were told that we were going on lockdown, a lot of people bought firearms, ammo just to stock up because they realized that once things start slowly, again, once things start to slowly open back up, that scarcity mindset sets into play, which actually plays on what Andrew Yang for Prez spoke about earlier in the chat too. I want to get to his question. He asked, would reparations, let me see if I can get it. Yeah. Reparations, what would healing look like if we have reparations? Would it be cash, community investment, free education, tax, housing, a combination of all the above? And I think he makes a really good point that yes, a lot of the stuff that happens is due to the fact that there's not enough resources being pumped into the Black community. There's not enough opportunity being brought there. There's not a whole lot. And so when you don't have enough resources to survive on, and when you don't have the necessary things, the basic things to survive on, you're going to steal it. You're going to plunder from somebody else that doesn't have it.
I hear that, but and yeah, that's I think that's like another thing. I'm basically talking about an upheaval against the powers that be, the wealthy. Because I mean, if you think about it, they have a stronghold on us. You know, from the private prisons. You know, people literally invest in private prisons, and they need a quota.
Oh yeah,
a certain amount of people in order to make a profit.
Oh yeah.
And then they keep us like in poverty. They keep us mass incarcerated. You know, they you know, I mean, it's not even just Black people. It's just, you know, like I said earlier, it's just like poor white people as well. Like, you know, we will constantly be like stuck in these shackles as long as we don't see that we have similarities. Like we're both oppressed by the same oppressors. And it's like, I'm basically just saying, you know, is a full-on upheaval against the, like, how would that look? Or do you think that could be an answer?
Sometimes I feel like we need to burn things to the ground in order to reorganize, honestly. Right?
Yeah.
And you know, like I have a lot of opinions that are like not popular or that people really think but are like afraid to say because they're afraid to be judged by other people. You know what I mean? So you know, I just kind of say stuff, right? That sometimes I feel like other people are thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Because my lady sometimes will tell me like, you can't say that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I a lot of times I feel like in order to fix a problem, you first have to recognize you have one, right? But more importantly, like we have to, we might have to like rebuild from like the ground up at some point.
Yeah,
you know
that
what I mean?
Happen. Like you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, reform and fixing the broken system. All of it is just, you know, messed up. You know, it's like, where do you even start? I mean, and then you have the healthcare system as well and the education system as well. It's like, where do you even start? It's just like the whole system just needs to be.
There was a guy on
built back up.
There was a guy on CNN or no CNBC. So I watch a lot of CNBC and Fox News. Now, both of them are one's right, one's left. But if you see the difference between CNBC and MSNBC and Fox News Business and Fox News, it's like they're both Fox Business and CNBC are both focused on the money, right?
Yeah.
So because they're focused just so much on the money, the stock market. They're also focused on. They were focused on today. They were on the stimulus. You get a little bit of left and a little bit of right on both sides, but you get less politics out of them, and you just get talk about money. There was a black guy on that was talking about the guy that brought him on said, asked him a few questions, but he said, finally, I wanted to talk to you about, there's this notion that you say is false, that in the black community, if there was more home ownership, in the black community, that wealth would increase exponentially. And judging from your article that you recently wrote, you said that's not the case. And so the guy goes into this opinion where he says that in order to have wealth, you have to have wealth in order to get wealth, right? So, and wealth begets more wealth, right? Like the idea of it takes money to make money, right? So he was saying that in order for the black community to catch up to where the rest of America is on the low end of the black spectrum, he's saying it's going to have to come from the government doing a step in at some point.
I think another part of it is
stuff's not going to just materialize out of nowhere.
Right. I think, Genie, you had a comment that you wanted to put on there?
Yeah. Another part of it is I think more of us should run for state level campaigns as well. Change laws around here. I know, Ronald, you announced something recently. What was that?
Yes. So right now I am running for a precinct delegate in my county of St. Joseph County here in Michigan. And the county itself has been red for like the past, they said about 10 years now. It's very Republican. And there hasn't been like an actual single good Democratic candidate to run against somebody to kind of hold some type of office. The past 4 years, we had one guy who ran for a different district in Kalamazoo, city of Kalamazoo, and he won that. And so now he's pretty much running for election for the Senate House of the United States government to represent the state of Michigan. Now, the person that I'm working with, she's a young lady that grew up in St. Joseph County. So she knows the county like the back of her hand. And the one thing that me and her talked about was getting more black folks, more young folks, more anybody that's wanting to make a change to run for office. And even talking with the St. Joseph County Democratic chair, she wants me to be able in the next 2 years to run for the county commissioner. And then from there to see if we could get a good campaign going to push me into more so of a state level kind of ordeal, due to the fact that there's none like me or like us that are running for any kind of office. I mean, except for, of course, we got to give a shout out to Eric, and he's running it in California. But at the same time, like
District 30.
Yes. Yes. And so, like, it just, like I said, in just my state alone, like there's hardly anybody that's a person of color running for any kind of office, whether it's on a federal level, whether it's on a state level, or even on a local level. You don't see it as much. And so that's pretty much what my plans are and what I'm wanting to do, and pretty much go from there and see what happens.
Yeah, I wish you luck, Ronald. That sounds great.
Yeah, we all wish you luck. How does that unfold? Like, what's the time frame for you to make the announcement and get everything together?
Well, as of right now, because the precinct delegate, it works with the candidates that are running in their respective county. Like I said before, there is a young lady. She's running in our county to represent our county in the state legislature in the state of Michigan. That's what she's running. And basically, if I'm able to help her to get into her seat, what she's able to do then from there is she's able to help the guy running in the 6th district of Michigan for the senator's seat. We're able to prop him up so he could be successful. And so a lot of it, whether people think it's trickled down, no, it's actually trickled up. It starts at a very bottom level, and we just build the momentum going up. And so that's what happens, I know, here in the state of Michigan, where a lot of like policies have been kind of going back and forth. A lot of the cities going back and forth is more so on a local level that not a lot of people are running for those offices that very well they could do it, especially if the offices have been ran by nothing but Republicans. You know, that would be a good start.
And so many of these like seats, these state seats are being run unopposed because a lot of people don't even like know or care or think anything can change from these state level seats. But I've seen like I don't know if you guys have seen the legislation that Evan Lowe put out about like, I don't know, a few months ago, trying to get California universal basic income.
Yeah.
Thought that was cool. I think a lot of people really underestimate how powerful state representation is. Representatives are.
They do, yes. We need.
I got a question for you guys. How does
it.
everyone feel about the DHD?
What's that?
I was just about to ask you about that.
You were just about to ask me about that?
Yeah. What is before anyone tells about? Tell us, what is the DHD?
The Dark Horse Duo. That's what we have, a chat that we get in. We call it DHD. So
Fred.
Oh man.
Fred, be careful now. If we talk about that, we're gonna be on here for like another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
we don't have to talk about that.
All right.
I'll put it to you like this, Fred. We could talk about that one on a different segment because a lot of the stuff that pretty much has been brought up, I think will open up a huge conversation because now we're basically talking about getting rid of that two-party system.
Yeah.
And
I'm all about that. By the way, I'm all about that. This is why I think ranked choice voting is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
Right? Like I put ranked choice voting and ditching Citizens United and democracy dollars. That's a three-prong like a three-prong arrow that has to be shot out of the same bow, so to speak. Like all three of those things have to happen all at the same time in order to really break the system.
Yes.
Like a trident.
Yes. and again, that one, that conversation, if we get into that one, oh man, that's gonna open up a bunch of stuff. It is.
Oh man.
But I'll put it to you like this, Fred. If you like to talk about that one, we are more than happy to bring you back on so we can talk about that one and pretty much get the nuts and bolts out of it and just spin the conversation.
Yeah. I don't have any like I'm not on the inner circle of the inner workings of that. It's not even my thing. I was just wondering how people thought about that. But as far as ranked choice voting, like I'm 100%. How do you guys feel about how do I put this? When people make comments about whether the person is black or not, But when people make comments about the black community, like right now, Terry Crews is taking a beating, right? How do you guys feel about when people make comments about even, I saw people make comments about George Floyd and, well, what was he doing, right? And like my initial was like, does it matter if he was caught red-handed killing someone with an axe, right? Like, it does not matter. Like, the cop's job is to apprehend someone, bring them to jail, so that they can actually, so that person can receive their just due in front of 12, right? How do you guys feel like when people are making comments that you disagree with, and like what kind of effect does it have on the community as a whole, you think?
Well, so they found a way to segregate us, not by, the color of our skin legally. They found a way to segregate us by mass incarceration, the word criminal. And so they justify the wrongdoings of the Black community and, police killings and all of that. The first thing people ask is, what was their crime record? I see people like the Black conservatives, one of them, Candace Owens, and I'm sure there are others, but that's the only one that I actually know of. They talk about George Floyd's past, history with the law and all of that. And I mean, you're right, Fred, it doesn't matter. It's all a very well-organized system they have here. You go to jail, you're mass incarcerated, and you end up in the prison system over and over and over again. Now they have something to justify your killing with. Now they can treat you however they want to treat you. They can punch you in the face and somebody record it. Oh, look at their record. They did this, and this, So this whole idea of like looking at people's crime record to
Oh, she froze.
backwards.
Yeah, she froze.
Basically, justify. If we're gonna say the cops are here to serve and protect, then it goes against that. It's ironic. But I think I know, and maybe other people know as well, that the cops don't exist to serve and protect. They exist to put us in order they need us to be in.
Oh man.
One of the things I've noticed about the, from somebody who's a white perspective, right? Like somebody who's, like I grew up in an all Black community. I've been, I in St. Louis, like in a rough area. I got 14 years clean, so I've sponsored many Black males, and like I've had close relationships with Black families because of that. One of the things that I notice about other communities when they speak on Black issues, I feel like Black Americans are very forgiving, and that they will literally talk through the issues about their community if you bring it to them personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have an issue with a way Black culture does a certain thing, or you have an issue with or you have something to say about what happened about A, B, or C, as long as you bring that to the Black community, if you're caught on a podcast, 3-4 white people or 3-4 Latinos or people that are just not Black that want to talk about Black issues as if Black people are problematic, that, based off of what I've seen, really, really pisses the Black community off, because it's like, if you have a problem with me, like, talk to me. You know what I mean? Don't talk amongst yourself as if like, hey, I'm the problem and my people are the problem. You know what I mean?
Well, it's very convenient to be in an echo chamber. With
What's
people
that?
it's very convenient to be in an echo chamber full of people who will just agree with you.
Yeah, and so like a lot of times when I'm when I'm talking with someone, it bothers me when like the other day, and this obviously wasn't about the black community, but this white trucker came up to me and he talked about, and he used a slur talking about the Sikhs, right? And these Sikhs there's tons of Sikhs and they wear a turban, right? And you like people with the turban, they have a slur that they like to throw around for people with turbans, right? And I was like, actually, they're called Sikhs, and they're actually really, really nice people, right? If you get to know them, right? And I feel like I feel like that one of the problems that we have within the separation of Americans is there's not enough people where when the separation is happening, whether it be white or black or Latino or whatever, they're not willing to say, hey, like, you don't have to say that or do that. Those people that you're calling those people are actually just like you and me if you get to know them, right? And because we don't have enough people doing that, but then what you'll have, those very same people will get on the internet and like, instead of stopping somebody dead in their tracks for saying or doing something, then they'll try to shame people. And I feel like that behavior is a huge, we need to take a huge leaps and bounds improvement on that.
True. We do. And basically we all have to pretty much come together and talk about these issues and get them out on the table and say, okay, we know we have these issues. Let's find a goal to get these issues resolved so they don't keep coming back again. And let's keep moving forward and let's keep tackling the next thing, because if it's left untreated, it's going to cause a bigger mess than if we would have took care of it the first time around, And so, yeah, I agree that rather than just go to, like how Ashley said, go to your echo chambers, like, no, get people together. Let's talk about it. Let's find a way to get them resolved, and then let's move on to whatever's next that needs to get tackled. And so that mess can stop, and a lot of things can heal properly if you give it enough time and the space and the energy to do so.
Yeah, and I do that on my Twitter. Like, I don't actively post a lot. I retweet a lot, but I sometimes will drag out certain echo chamber like conversations I see, especially if it's like Black conservative or if it's something that's kind of like against what most people I know believe. Like if it's anti-BLM, anti-whatever, I'll sometimes just kind of like drag it out. There was one thing about like some African people who were not so keen on supporting Black Lives Matter because they felt like Black people didn't care for those Africans, and I kind of retweet and post these things. That's a whole different conversation for a different day. But and it's just like, it's like instead of having these echo chambers where people just like talk about this and like you feel so good about talking, and sometimes people want to vent, but it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm just like, let's get this on the table. Let's just hash this one out between these groups. And that's of course part of why I love Ying, because he really would go and talk to people that maybe other people wouldn't, and you had a real conversation between people who are not necessarily alike. And it's like, yeah, this is exactly what needs to happen. Don't just talk to the people who you already know agree to you, and show how like you have your woke Olympics or whatever to show how much you can get these people.
Woke Olympics.
And it's just like or whatever is going on. It's like, we sometimes have to have these disagreements.
No, that's accurate. The woke Olympics on Twitter. Yep.
Well, here's the thing that as a somebody, and I just keep it real, man. I just keep it so real. As somebody who's white, like the woke Olympics, the greatest athletes in the woke Olympics are all white people. They're all white people, right? And I'm like, dude, like, just stop, man. I'm just like, dude, just stop. The only reason why you're acting the way you're acting online is you wouldn't stop somebody in person acting this way.
Overcompensation.
Like, no, that is the conversation. Like, I'm like, that's the only reason why you're doing this. You wouldn't say squat to anyone. If you saw a bunch of KKK people at a rally, you wouldn't say or do anything to them, right?
Yeah.
Or if you were driving by in Arkansas or Mississippi and you saw somebody and somebody said something to you, you would get back in your Toyota Highlander and bounce.
Oh man.
Like, stop. Like, just stop. It drives me nuts.
Man.
Yeah. That's definitely the overcompensation going on there. That's a good point.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up. Any final thoughts, comments, whatever, before we close?
Purchase a weapon. Purchase a weapon. Purchase some time at the range. Purchase some time with a professional to teach you about your weapon. And for me, I think especially every female should own a firearm.
Agreed. I agree. And also, just to kind of add on there too, if you guys are thinking about purchasing a firearm, make sure you do your own background check, because I know what the issue I'm dealing with my second purchase of a firearm. I'm going through a bunch of red tape that probably could have been easily avoidable and solved if I had the time to actually kind of do that firsthand, just to kind of know what's going on. But if you guys are able to do your own background check and make sure that you have nothing on your record that would keep you from purchasing a firearm, please do so. And so at least that way you know that when you go and you get your firearm, you're going in there with a peace of mind. You're like, okay, I'm good. Let me go ahead and do what I got to do and everything else. That's it for me. Anybody else?
Yeah, the last thing is, I know, like, in fact, one black woman was she's from the Maryland area, so she's seen a lot of the guns and the violence, and she was actually more anti, guns overall. And it was interesting you mentioned the white supremacist mindset and how black people will, I guess, say some of those things. So that was a case where that resonated, because she works in a system where she kind of comes into contact with a lot of people who are criminals or, had guns illegally. So it's like, how do you kind of convince those people who...
It's all about equality. You have the equality conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about, do we believe in equality? And if we believe in equality, that equality is afforded to everyone, regardless of male, female, black, white, Latino, sexual preference, religion. None of those things matter. That's where me personally, I always bring it back to is. And then when people want to talk about circumstances, I'm like, okay, well, circumstances don't change people's desire to be equal. So those desires should be without explanation.
Yeah, I think we talked about a lot today. Yeah, I hope this conversation was
She's frozen.
for us.
Ashley, you with us? Just to piggyback on what you said, we just hope that this conversation. Ashley, finish your thought.
Oh, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys learned something from our live stream.
Oh yeah, oh yes, and again, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Again, thank you for all those who have subscribed. We appreciate the love. Again, thank you for Fred for joining us today on his live stream.
Erica, Erica for Congress, go ahead and donate.
That part too. Erica Congress, go ahead and donate for that. Again, let's see. Ashley, she has her
podcast. Yes. My Twitter handle is Ashley SHEPPRD. And then in the pinned tweet is my podcast link. I just put up a new one. I talk about a lot of stuff in my podcast.
DM me your Twitter, Ashley.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All righty.
I'll check your podcast out. Talk to you later, guys.
All right, you guys.
Have a good night. Is there a song, by the way?
No song.
Okay.
No
mention.